His appetite causes us to crave more and more, and we commit more sins and different kinds of sins. And eventually, his destructive power ends up in wrecked lives, and wrecked families, and wrecked marriages, and wrecked health, and makes of us, who were created in God's image, good and upright was the way we were all created. But that beast, that force, through his deceit, deceptiveness, and his appetites, makes us like little shriveled, misshapen goblins who are no longer what God intended. And our lives begin this downward spiral into a vortex of the emptiness and separation from God that's called hell. We, who God created good, were not designed for hell. Listen, we have a dilemma because we recognize, I'm talking about people even who are not yet born again, recognize that that is not what my life should be about. We have this desire and this vision of good and accomplishing things that have merit and worth. And yet we find this power within us constantly causing us to do these things that we don't want to do. We were created to live eternally in full communion with the loving Father. That was God's intent. He created us to freely choose him above all else and over all others. Free to serve him. Free to love him. But we, like Cain, at some point opened the door to sin, and surely just as God said, there lies that beast, crouching and waiting his opportunity. Yes, we can look at people's lives that we know from our history books: Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Charlie Manson, Timothy McVeigh, Ted Bundy, the Columbine killers, the 9/11 terrorists. The list goes on and on. People who have made those terrible impacts upon history, but they didn't begin their lives that way. They, like all of us, were born good and upright before the Lord. They didn't begin life as twisted, demented sociopaths. They began like us, created in God's very image. And it was by increments of individual and separate choices that they became twisted and distorted from what God created. Those same influences of sin, that same power of the beast that was at work in them is at work in every person. We are all different from them only by degrees and only by choices. We are the same. Paul said in Romans chapter 5:20, where sin abounds, grace does much more abound. We sang songs like Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, now I'm found. I was blind, now I see. All our stories are different, but somewhere, I hope everyone here this morning, somewhere, somehow, thanks to God's grace and the wooing of the Holy Spirit, like Paul, we cry out to God, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall free me from the body of this death?" And God answers through my Son, Jesus Christ. And we cry, I thank God through Jesus Christ, my Lord, that I have been set free from this body of death. And it all begins with the most simple and the most profound prayer that has ever broken the lips of any person. God, help! And when God hears it, he responds.